Hey there, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness episode 195. This is all about mother grief, mother chaos, cycles of creation, transition, labor. You get the idea. There's this inextricable link between loss, grief, death, and creation or birth and new life. So today's episode is with Amanda Beaumont, and she knows firsthand the intensity and darkness of grief after the death of her fifth child. Today she shares with us her powerful story. And maybe you haven't lost a child, but we've all lost something. We've all had to go through these really deep grief cycles, addressing our primal fears and coming into a decision to actually heal. And the process of surrendering are all the keys to not only mothering or new birthing ideas and creations, but also coming in and healing ourselves, the creation of our new self that seeks to be born. So happy Thanksgiving this week. Think of all the bounteous abundance that we do enjoy on this earth, coming home to our Mother Earth and connecting to her and giving gratitude for everything that we enjoy and all of the chaos we endure. Amanda, welcome to the show. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. Just beautiful to have you here. Yeah. And I loved our pre-conversation and just kind of feeling into, I think both of you and you even voiced it, trusting divine timing.
Yes.
Trusting what people show up when. And, when I have a book in my hands, I get to weigh out, would this be a good guess? Would this be a good fit? And your book of poems is really beautiful and right up my alley.
Thank you.
And we can thank my friend, Dr. Jennifer Selig, for connecting us.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's great. And she sends
an
me
amazing woman
times. And I'm like, I trust whoever Jennifer brings to my path. So.
Oh, yes.
Let's just go into how you're in this chair right now talking to me. And, we're theming this with grief. We're theming this with mothering and kind of this walk into surrender that you and I had just discussed, which I want to explore. But how did this book Becoming Poems for the Awakening Soul? How did this come to be? And those of you watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up. Usually when we have such a beautiful gift that we need to offer this planet, it will often come in the form of something very challenging. Almost always. So do you want to walk us through a little bit of that process for you?
I would love to. So before I get to what shattered me and broke me into a bazillion pieces, where I had to find my way into healing, I went on a spiritual journey of sorts about a year ago and found this beautiful, really small, quiet school called Vistara. And it's a unschooling of sorts where you're able to tap into your own soul's wisdom and your own soul's knowing of what needs to come next. And when I said yes to whatever that might be, I began to hear words just flowing through me. And I didn't quite understand what was going on at first. I am not a writer. I am now, but I've never written something before. And so I just started writing these words that I were hearing. And my little ones would know when I would kind of get focused on just needing to get them out of me. They would get quiet and still and allow me the space to do so.
What a gift.
And
can you send some of that over here when I'm ready to write with my kids?
Yes, I would be more than happy. It is that surrender. It is surrendering to truly the flow and becoming that vessel and all things we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. But as I shared these with my mentors, I was going through these Vistara circles and uncovering more of my soul's wisdom. She encouraged me, this others need to hear this. This is beautiful. And knowing your story, you really need to share this and get this out. And then I happened to come upon Dr. Jennifer Seelig through another book that she had published, and reached out to her and asked, hey, I've never done this before. Is this something that maybe you could help me with? And she graciously said yes. And so now I find myself here with this book, because as the words were coming, I knew that they were not for me and they were not mine to keep. They were for the universe. They were for others to read and to remember themselves, their own soul's wisdom. So anyway, that's how the book came about. But prior to the book,
and it's poetry. So this is poetry. Like beautiful structure with the words, not just like I don't write poetry yet, but for me when I get things come through, it's like ideas or, like pieces of my own story, because I'm writing this memoir, like flashes of that. But for you, it was coming through as just poetry.
Poetry, just words. I even, because Jennifer would talk about the line breaks, and I don't even knew what that meant, but those would come through. And as I would type them, it was very important after I would type something out to record myself reading it and then closing my eyes and listening back. And if I heard again what I heard that first time, I knew it was complete. My voice reading it back was very important.
Oh, interesting.
In this process for me.
I have heard that writers will often do that. If they put it on paper and it streams through, they need to read it back to themselves to make sure that there's a flow or a sentence. Right. The words with it, the voice.
Understand that. So that was part of my process of just having written this. And like I said, I've never had experience doing it before. So it was all very new, very interesting. I questioned myself maybe a couple times, but after that, I didn't. I knew I have this knowing that these words are universal. They're for everybody. And they will resonate with who they need to resonate with. And I believe that.
That's so beautiful, because as I'm listening to you talk about this, it feels like you weren't in a place of ego, like, how's this going to be received? Or how are people going to think about my writing style? I mean, maybe you went through that later, but like when it's coming through, you had this knowing of this is pure, this is coming from source. This is coming from this is something that I can't even claim in my ego state or what have you. Right.
Right. I couldn't, because I just knew from the very beginning, this was absolutely from source, and these were not mine. And even now I'm so appreciative to those that I'm able to give a book to and just share, because I feel like a poem may resonate with them. Because I think that's what's most important is that touching somebody else's heart. These words are for others. And I've known that through this entire process.
Yeah, you hear a lot of artists say getting out of their own way was the crucial point, or that pivotal point where it became magic. Like whatever they were trying to create, when they got out of their own head of how is this going to be received, or putting the judgment on it as it's like editing yourself as it's coming out, which I'm literally talking to myself right now because this is what I do. But as I head into 2023, just getting so intentional about that process of letting soul voice just come through and trusting it is so powerful. Have you ever heard of this book, Do the Work? It's sitting on my desk right here by Stephen Pressfield. It's just a short little book, and I'll often just open it. It'll just have the most amazing. It's mostly for writers, but it's talking about your soul gift and how that is seeking expression constantly through you, and it isn't about you, like you said. It's a gift to raise the consciousness. It's a gift for humanity. But I'm just going to read this little. I have it dog-eared because I wasn't going to do this until I saw it on my desk, and this is exactly what we're talking about. The hospital room may be spotless and sterile, but birth itself will always take place amid chaos, pain, and blood. Babies are born in blood and chaos. Stars and galaxies come into being amid the release of massive primordial cataclysms. The most highly cultured mother gives birth sweating and dislocated and cursing like a sailor. Now, the reason that came through, I think, for me to share is that you had to go through a process in this labor that preceded the book, right?
Yes. Yes.
And we'll go there next if you're okay with that.
Yes.
Because there's two pieces to creation. There's like your life, your lived experience, and the labor intensity there. And then that is birthed into a grief process, if you will, or an integration process. And then you're usually called to create something on the other side of that, which in and of itself is chaos. So if you're okay, let's go back to like what preceded even you going to maybe that retreat and getting the words to come through.
Right. I lost my son Emmett when he was 10 and a half months old. He is our fifth child. I have 6 children. This happened in September of 2018. So it's been a little over 4 years that he has transitioned. He was born with a genetic disease called Krabbe disease. And my husband and I had no idea that we even carried a gene for Krabbe disease. In fact, we were in, the genetic screening when you're newly pregnant, and there were no red flags that we should be concerned of. But when Emmett was about 6 months old, he began regressing in all of his milestones.
So he was perfectly healthy until 6 months old.
Yes, he was seemingly healthy. To me, seemingly healthy. He was doing what he was supposed to do. But at 6 months old, he started to cry a lot, like more than normal. Doctors thought it might be some reflux. He started to become very stiff in his limbs, but floppy in his trunk. And it led me to our pediatricians in tears because I was so overwhelmed. The crying and the screaming was just so much. And my baby, there was something wrong with my baby. And my pediatrician agreed with me, but didn't know what was wrong. We got sent to the hospital one time with him, to see if maybe the doctors at the hospital might be able to figure out something. And at that point, he was choking a lot and not able to eat. And so we got sent home after a couple of tests, but nothing conclusive. He got maybe some medicine at that time, but nothing touched what was going on with him. And he just continued to progressively scream longer, scream harder, arch his back. He was unable to eat at all. He just kept choking and choking. And he became very stiff, and his fists would kind of turn in and his feet would turn in like that. We went to the hospital a second time begging for a feeding tube because we couldn't safely feed our baby anymore. And at that point in the hospital, more tests were done with him. And we were down at a wonderful, wonderful children's hospital in Charlotte. They took such good care of us. And eventually, when his diagnosis came in while I was at the hospital with him, it was the neurosurgeon, the neurologist that had done an MRI on his brain that saw what this was. And he came in and he sat down very matter of fact next to me. And, Emmett was still just screaming in bed, maybe around 7 or 8 months old at this time. And he goes, well, he has Krabbe disease. And I looked at him and my eyes got huge because I had, of course, been doing all of the worst case scenario type research on what could be wrong. My husband and I were we weren't hopeless, but we were just helpless in that there was something wrong with our baby, and nobody could figure out what. But the neurologist had seen it. He let it slip, and I just looked at him with these huge eyes, and I started crying. And he's like, "I thought you knew. I thought they told you." And then that poor man just hurried out of the room because he knew what he had just done without intention.
Just dropped a bomb that no one was.
He dropped a massive bomb. The nurses ran in, and at that point, I just fell to pieces. Krabbe disease is treatable. It is not curable. There's no cure for it. There's only 10 states that currently screen for Krabbe disease, and we live in a state that did not screen for it. So we had no idea.
What state are you in?
We're in North Carolina, and they don't screen for it. So we didn't know. But Krabbe disease is a leukodystrophy that affects the white matter in your brain. It's a gene mutation that creates the enzyme, as I understand it, I might get little details wrong, but creates the enzyme that creates the myelin sheath that goes around the nerves, both in your central nervous system and then your peripheral nervous system.
So was your baby in a lot of pain? Is that why he was crying so much? Is it a painful thing, or is it just
horrific pain?
Oh.
It was, as one doctor described to me, fireworks shooting off within him, because the myelin, the white matter that protects your nerves and your nerve endings, protects that. But as those, your brain is shooting off all of these voluntary and involuntary commands, there was no protection. And so not only was there that excruciating pain, but it also explained the loss of him being able to eat correctly, the loss of muscles being able to hold himself up. He eventually went blind and deaf. That went away for him. It just...
Sounds like it was very fast too. Like he got diagnosed at 6 months. It was very degenerative very quickly.
It was this particular one. Now, Krabbe disease has 4 different onsets, and he had an early infantile onset. And so his symptoms showed at early infancy, which is why it was so fast for him. There's a late infantile, an early childhood, and an adult onset.
Wow.
And you don't know it until either you've been tested and you know it, or until you begin showing these signs. For him, because he wasn't tested, and he did seem to just go very quickly, there was nothing we could do for him except for give him the medication to make him comfortable. All I wanted was for my baby to stop crying. Yeah. Because we couldn't hold him, because it hurt too bad to hold him. And when a mother can't hold her baby that's screaming in bed, and you know that he's sick and there's not going to be too many more times that you can hold him, your heart just fractures wide open. You would do anything to ease that suffering and that pain that he was feeling. So eventually, once we got diagnosed and we knew that at this point there was nothing we can do, but that we could keep him comfortable. And that was, at that point, my only goal was I want him comfortable. We brought him home with hospice, and we had a wonderful hospice organization where we live that allowed him to stay in the home with me as long as we did his feeding tube and administered the medication that he needed. And he was home with us for about 2 months. Really in a sedative type of state. But at that point, we were able to hold him again. And I was so thankful to be able to do that. And he spent his days in the middle of our living room with all the rest of us. He was number 5. So there were 4 other kids and husband and dogs and myself. And, he was still part of our family.
Surrounded by that love. And
absolutely.
I'm sure it was. So how old were your other kids at this time? So say it was probably really.
My oldest would have been 12 or 13 at that time. And then if it was 13, then it was definitely 12 and 11. And then my number 4, Ruby, was just a year older than Emmett. So she was around 18 months, 20 months during this time. Very intense for especially the older kids, because
in saying that, I mean also like not necessarily a negative intensity, although there's the sadness and the grief that ensues and the shock and just the children process things very differently according to their personality. But what I'm also thinking of the intensity with just oftentimes when there's a hospice situation, it can be very sacred when you bring that person home, knowing that there's limited time and there's just a different feeling.
Yeah.
I remember when my husband and I were engaged, his niece, it was after we were married, actually very early in our marriage. His niece, who was like 8, had cancer and they brought her home. And I remember going into just even opening the door, not even being with her yet or anything. It was like a holy place. Right. And same when I've said goodbye to my grandmother, and same when I actually walked into the room, the first to find that my grandfather had passed away, and it was the same kind of feeling. It was just sacred space. So I'd imagine your home became transported into heaven in lots of regards.
It had to have been. I'm not sure looking back at it, because I was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Would I see it that way during that time? All I saw was, I've got 4 other children that still need to get to school, their homework, their sports, their friends. I still need to put supper on the table for our family. We still need to run our business. I still have invoices and emails I have to catch up on for business. And every 2 hours, I needed to make sure Emmett got his medicine so that he wouldn't begin to scream again and feel the pain. So I think looking back, it had to have been a sacred space. Being in it, I was in absolute just autopilot survival mode, trying to get through, thinking of all of the others, thinking of him.
I can't imagine, but are you okay if we just take a pause here and I read Mothers?
Yes.
Because you're talking about doing all the errands and sorry. I feel that. Yeah, you read it because I'm going to cry. So this is Amanda's poem from her book Becoming, and it's called Mothers.
Mothers. To all the mamas, the women, the mothers, the moms, to the ones who carried their sons and daughters in their womb, felt their baby move, heard the heartbeat of life within, and bravely birthed their child. The ones who selflessly gave their hearts to a child not of their womb, who opened themselves to the young ones seeking a mother's love and warm home. To the ones who suffered a miscarriage, anticipating life and the possibility one moment, and facing intense loss and confusion the next. The ones who felt battled with the decision to abort an unwanted pregnancy, feeling as if they had no other choice than this. To the ones who have been through the roller coaster of shots of hormones, the insane cost and intrusiveness of IVF, only to have their hopes come crashing down or greatest dream realized. To the ones who've suffered the shattering of the passing of their child, who with chin quivering, eyes to heaven carries on and mothers their child on the other side. The ones who are called auntie, grandma, sister, or teacher, even the ones who nurture and care for an animal or pet or elderly parent or career, you are a mother of sorts too. To the ones who mother 1, 2, or 10 beautiful souls, who nourish, nurture, who love, who hold their breath as they watch their baby take a first step, learn to ride a bike, drive away in a car, get married, and one day have a child of their own. I see you, dear one. I see your courage, tenacity, and strength, your love, kindness, and concern. I see your deep wrinkles that were etched with compassion, your gray hairs grown out of fret and innate wisdom. I hear you laugh deeply and worry just as hard. I hold sacred your tears of joy and tears of sorrow. I feel your pride and disappointment. I realize the anxiety and strong will. I understand the sacrifices you've made. I smile at your dreams, your wishes, your deepest heart's desires for yourself, as well as those dreams you hold for your young. To become a mother, to watch your heart walk outside of your body, to say yes to the hardest role on the planet, to nurture another soul, another being, to serve another human, is to answer one of the greatest and noblest of callings. I humbly thank you and give gratitude for your perseverance. It doesn't matter how good or how bad or what kind of mom you are. It doesn't matter your mistakes, regretful decisions, your imperfections. It doesn't matter. You are perfect. You were chosen to mother your child exactly how you're doing it. It is all divine planning, full of great love and attention for your personal growth and expansion. I see your light, beautiful one. I see your love and grace, your sacrifice and juggling of schedules and budgets. I know what you have given up to be where you are now, your body and comfort, time and energy. You have allowed your old identity and ideals to fall away, all for another. To mother a child is both the hardest and most rewarding thing we can do. It is a selfless gift that we give to another. It is in the giving that we discover the truth of who we are. It is the true essence of yourself as a divine soul of love and light. I see you, dear one, and I honor the work that you are doing, the lessons you are learning, the heart that you witness as your baby navigating this big, wide world. And I say thank you, and I so deeply praise and adore you.
Mm. When you wrote this, thank you for reading that. I felt that. When you wrote this, obviously you were, well, maybe it's not obvious. Were you talking to yourself or were you talking to mothers at large?
I think both. I think when I hear the poetry come through, I'm just that vessel at that time to write the words. When I go back and read it, I know that I needed to hear it just as much as a handful of mothers out there.
You know,
Absolutely.
Some of the most recent advice I've gotten as I've been immersed in the writing process is to write my book for myself.
Yeah.
And as if I were writing in my journal or the book that I wish I could have read, et cetera, you know, when I was in crisis. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to maybe take us through the moment where he was passing and how that felt, mm-hmm. what you experienced maybe in your body, if you have that recollection, and then bring us back out into how you went into the grief process. And I'm curious too, just as a side note, some people dive right into the grief process. Mm-hmm. And for some people, for mothers, especially who are busy or have things going on, they kind of have to shelf a lot of it. So maybe as you transition and bridge us over into your grief process, kind of walk us through what that was like navigating such a large family through that whole transition process.
Okay. So we were, Emmett had been home for a couple months with a hospice, and over those couple of months, we continued to have to increase his medication because it seemed that every couple of days it would have no effect anymore, and he would be back to the screaming and the arching and just in clear, intense pain. Mm. As I said, he had lost his vision. He had lost his hearing. The hospice doctors had just warned us that would happen and told us when it was confirmed. But I felt that he could always feel and smell. And so I would always just sing and be near and love on him the best way that I knew how. It had gotten to a point where it was very obvious we were nearing the end, and his the food that he was doing through his feeding tube was no longer serving him. And my husband and I had to face probably one of the most horrific decisions that we ever had to make. And that was to decide to turn off his feedings. And we wrestled back and forth with it. We cried on each other's shoulders about it. And ultimately, we looked to Emmett to ask him and to allow him to tell us if this was the right thing for him at that time or not. And almost immediately, there was such peace as soon as we turned off his feedings. You talked about a sacred space. Maybe that is when our home became that sacred space, was when that decision was made. And we had come to peace ourselves. We knew what turning off food meant. We could keep him sedated, for a long time, as long as he was fed. But when that had to happen, and it was just a hard decision, but the best one we could have done. And it was a very unselfish decision because we were thinking of him. And he told us immediately, with the peace that came over him and really the peace that was felt within our home, that it was the right decision. And it was 10 days after we had made that decision to turn it off that he had passed. I was laying next to him that night, and there was a lot of mucus that was new. And I had turned to grab a cloth to wipe the mucus out of his mouth. And when I turned back, I knew that he was gone. I immediately just felt shattered. I knew it was coming, especially after we turned off food. I knew every day this could be the day, but for it to happen completely shatters you. I'm sure I probably screamed. I kept calling my husband for him to come over to also, to bear witness that Emmett hadn't left, that he was gone. Our littlest one at the time was asleep. Our older children were there in the living room with us. And so they were also there to witness. And then after that, to have to make the phone calls that you have to make is just so hard to do. I wanted to just melt away with Emmett. Like, I wanted nothing more than to just go with him. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the intense, sharp pain that I was feeling. Like, I had an idea, but I didn't understand it until I felt it. And then I didn't want it anymore because it was just so painful. I had never lost anything before, anybody before, not even a dog. So this was my first experience of loss. And it was intense. But the whole time, I remember folding myself over him and just wrapping myself. And then my husband coming over, and I remember him holding the both of us. There was this thought of, take me too. I want to go with him. I don't want to be here to feel this. And then, are my other children okay? What do they need? They are also grieving the same way that I am. What do they need? How are they feeling? What does the pain feel like for them? How are they able to process this? And so I felt very torn between just wanting to dissolve into my intense grief all of a sudden, but then also my children, they need me, and they need to see me. They need this direction. They need to know that I'm going to be okay. And so are they. So it was confusing. And then I remember days and weeks that followed being very confused. Just, what do I do? How do I be?
There's no textbook, really.
There's not.
Even if somebody is in the process of dying, you're never prepared for that shattering. And there's no right way to do it, right? With grief. It's
I
just
don't believe there is.
Case by case, person by person basis.
It is. It truly is. And there's no right or wrong. I don't believe there's any right or wrong way to do it either. But it did feel very confusing for me because, moments, I would feel wonderful. I would feel great. I would feel like mom and go about my day. And then other moments, I feel like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The grief would hit me again. But then, depending on where I was or who I was with children or out with their school or school friends or grocery stores or whatever, I would have to collect myself very quickly. I got really good at sobbing in the shower. That was just
water is
that was my
very
space.
Healing. Yeah.
Very healing. I was let alone and I could cry the way I needed to. Just the sounds that come out when you're just in that grief are so primal. And I was able to do that in the shower. So I spent weeks and months just kind of finding my way. It was really kind of day by day, finding my way through that grief. And then one day I realized that I had a choice and that I could choose to heal from this grief, to just truly walk through this grief and understand what this was and to learn what I needed to learn from it. Or I could choose to just continue to be in my grief and in that confusion of every day, just kind of different and not knowing. And I remember making that very conscious decision. I'm going to heal from this. And I have a child that has transitioned to the other side. But I'm not going to be, I'm not going to allow that to be my identity. And when I made that decision, it was, and I don't remember the exact time or place, just that I know I realized it was a choice and I made a choice. Yeah. And for me, when that happened, I began to connect with Emmett in ways that I have never connected with anybody before. Wow. I felt him near me. I saw signs of him everywhere. I began to hear whispers that I knew were not my own, and I knew that they were him. And I then said yes to the journey of what this grief was. And it was not pretty all days. Some days I still would find myself in the bottom of the shower just sobbing. But then other days I could breathe and take a breath and know where he was and begin to see the light again in all others. And that grief journey, I think, is something that maybe continues for a long time. I don't know if there's ever an end sign to it, because I honestly don't know if there ever was that here's the beginning sign to the grief. We all have grief in different ways. I grieved the passing of Emmett for months prior to him actually transitioning.
Yeah, it was like anticipatory grief.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if there's ever this start, and I'm not so sure there's ever this end. But what I do know is that I chose to heal. And when I began to heal, I really turned inward and began to just remember the truth of who we are. And I did begin this spiritual journey. And it was years after Emmett's passing and my choosing.
How long ago was that?
A little over 4 years.
4 years.
Yes, 2018. So that is then when I found the Vistara School and truly said yes to uncovering my soul's purpose. And when I said yes to that, having chosen to heal from grief, healing from my grief, although I still say I'm still healing from grief.
Yeah, it's a cycle. It's a circle. It never ends, like you said. Yeah,
it is. But it's a beautiful circle. Emmett's birthday was yesterday, and he would have been 5. And so there were definitely moments where I found myself again saddened and lost a little bit in my grief. But then I was just able to be there and release some more of the sadness and the trauma and pain. And then I was able to just smile and just say, I love you, Emmett, and thank you so much for having chosen me to be your mom and for this experience to have brought me where I am right now. That after saying yes to my soul's purpose, these beautiful words of poetry have come through so that they may serve another. And I can't think of anything greater or better having come from this story than that.
That's so beautiful. And you had another child after this.
We did have another child after.
Joy.
So much joy and so much healing. And it was a very intentional decision to do. And my husband and I talked back and forth a lot about, what would people think? We were afraid of
there's
that.
always that you have to battle, just the thoughts and the perceptions.
I know, just
of
the
others.
thoughts of others. We're not replacing Emmett. I hope people know that. This is, I don't know. And it was funny. It was a friend that I would see for breakfast once a month. And I kind of mentioned to her, I'm like, so we're thinking of having another baby. And she's like, well, why wouldn't you? I would. And it was so beautiful. And matter of fact, it gave permission, and I didn't realize I was needing that permission. And so we made the decision, and then we ended up doing IVF to ensure that our next child would not have Krabbe disease, because we did know that it was maybe not something we could go through again. Right. Going through just the journey of what Krabbe disease was. And so we had genetic testing done on our embryos to ensure that she is a carrier. Our children are carriers of Krabbe disease, and they will need to know that when they begin family planning, but she did not have the disease.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So, and she's
I love this, just this whole story and just the mother aspect. You and I both have 6 children, and you have 3 boys and 3 girls, right?
Yes.
As do I. And mine came super unconventionally. It's all going in the book, folks, all going in the book. But but I want to just wrap, if you're okay with me reading this Vessel poem, because this was the one poem that just stood out to me the most. And then we'll wrap this up, and you can tell people where to find your offering. So, Vessel. I am a vessel. Words, thoughts, ideas, creations all pour through me. They are not of me, nor are they mine to keep. What flows through me is of the divine. What pours out of me is for all others. I claim nothing, for there is nothing of my own to claim. I am a vessel. It is enough to have been chosen as the vessel for this work, for these words, for these ideas. I am not the only vessel. There are many. We are all vessels of a sort, as we are all the same. I am a vessel, one amongst the shelves, rows upon rows from floor to ceiling of shelves filling the cosmos. As many as there are stars in the universe, there are vessels of all varieties. Some are sturdy stoneware, unglazed and substantial with wide, thick handles. Others are porcelain, dainty and elegant, hand-painted with intricate design. Still others tall and skinny, some short and stout. Several as petite or bulky, ethereal or robust. Plenty show signs of wear, a few chipped along the rim, all perfect in their functioning, all created unique and different by the divine. all created with the same infinite love that is the divine. I am a vessel. Divine love and light pour out of me, as it is divine love and light that God's source pours into me. So beautiful.
Thank you. That is beautiful.
So Amanda, share with our listeners where they can find your book.
It's on Amazon.
So easy. So it's called Becoming. That was so easy. Becoming, Poems for the Awakening. Oh, sorry. Yes. Poems for Awakening the Soul by Amanda Beaumont. Thank you so much for your time together. This really touched my heart today.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate your time.
You know, I think what's been really affirming for me in this episode is just how cyclical grief is, and especially this whole rebirth death process that we're all undertaking by being in this world, and all the shatterings that we endure, knowing that they do pass, and that in time we're able to connect more fully to ourselves when we breathe into that and move with it, letting it hit you, and also letting it move you and transform you and transmute your pain into greater and greater light. Those of you who have children know that it's almost a moment by moment walk through transmuting pain, seeing your children go through hard things, seeing them make choices that maybe you wouldn't agree with, or letting them express themselves. They have to learn. That's another thing that struck me with this interview, is just drawing that line in the sand of like choosing to heal, choosing to be transformed. So with my deep gratitude for those of you who listen, I hope you have a gloriously amazing, bounteous, abundant week. And I'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.